All right, here we go with Brett.
All right, great. So I'm talking about water sharing between agriculture and municipal use. And just like Joel said, there's a lot more that could be talked about here that I'm going to have time for. But so I'm going to give you a blast of several ideas, and then in the Q&A we can get into any of it if you want. So here's what I'm going to talk about. 5 things. Water and agriculture, we already talked about that. I'll be brief. Alternative transfer methods. This is the idea of we do the status quo one way of transferring water from ag to municipal use. What are some alternatives to that? An example of it in Colorado, and not just Colorado, but here on the Front Range, barriers to this idea of water sharing, which there are a lot of. And then I wrote complementary actions, so putting the idea of water sharing to the side. If the goal is keeping farms in production locally, what are some other things we can do from a water mindset? So, irrigated agriculture, this is the same pie chart you've seen. This is the 3rd time or 4th time you've seen it. These are different numbers. This is the U.S. Geological Survey, but it's the general same. It's the same thing. And what I'm showing here is 87% of the diversions, not consumptive use. USGS only tracks diversions. Of the diversions are ag, and this is statewide. 8% is about public supply or municipal supply. So this has been touched upon. I just wanted to sort of maybe say it. Farms own the best water rights in the state. Our state was developed with an economy of agriculture. At the time it was developed, when we created this prior appropriation system, it was basically you could go claim the use of our state's natural resource, and you got a right to do that. And then the next person got a right, and the next person got a right, and so on for generations. Well, all those rights, the reason people were claiming the water was to irrigate land, because that was a dominant economic activity at the time. So a lot of the best water rights in the state have been and continue to be held by the agricultural community. And when I mean the best, I mean the most senior, the highest reliability, the best locations. They're in agricultural use because of our state's history. Now, had another industry come in the late 1800s and been the dominant economic engine of the state, the water rights would be in that use, but that's not what happened. So that's why a lot of the water rights are in agricultural use. That, and in the early 1900s, we had a lot of reclamation programs funded by the federal government to basically develop economic activity in rural areas of the western US. They also have water rights associated with them. So what does Larimer County look like? That's the county. You can kind of, it's hard to see, but there's a little outline right here. This is Larimer County. This is I took this box and did a snapshot. This is from the Colorado Department of Water Resources map viewer. If you ever want to just dive deep on water, go to this map viewer and just start clicking around. There is a wealth of information for everybody to look at on this map viewer. It is awesome. What you're looking at here is one of the things you can just click and see, I want to look at this. It's irrigated lands. Every 5 years, the state does a survey of satellite photos and picks out irrigated lands. These colors are the different crop types. But what you see here is, well, if you compare it to Weld County, which is just over here to the east, there's a ton of irrigated agriculture. Larimer County, you really have a few systems of ditches that are still in lots of production, but there's not a lot of irrigated agriculture in Larimer County. You got the North Pooter system, a couple systems here, Whisk, New Cache, Larimer, and Weld, kind of the head end of those systems, and then some systems that divert off the Big Thompson down here. But when I looked at this, my first reaction was, there's not a ton of irrigated agriculture compared to what it used to be, where everything from about this line up would have been irrigated, everything from about this line east would have been irrigated, and everything around this line southeast would have been irrigated. Because this is all where development has happened. But you can look at these map viewers of irrigated lands. I don't know how far back it goes. I want to say maybe 1990. But you can, every 5 years, so 2015, 2010, so on, you can look at the irrigated lands throughout the state of Colorado. So water sharing agreements, what's the whole idea? Well, the status quo and how we have built homes and businesses and anything else that uses water is sort of this top banner here, a permanent sale. So there's a willing seller, and because most of the water rights are held in agriculture and established in agriculture, because of the reasons I just said, they were the first economic activity in the state primarily. Most of the water rights are in that use. Most of the willing sellers are in agriculture. And then you have a willing buyer. Maybe it's a home developer, maybe it's a municipal government. And what happens is a permanent sale. So the farmer wants to sell, the municipality wants to buy. There's a permanent transfer of those water rights, permanent purchase, and it has a lot of benefits to both sides. From the seller's side, they get a large payment, they're done with the farm, they don't have to think about it, don't have to manage it. And on the buyer's side, it's finality. They don't have to work with a partner for a long period of time. They have ownership of it, and it's a known supply. It's just certainty. The alternative that has been talked about for over 10 years is, well, could we share water between these two uses? Not permanently transfer it, so it's owned by the municipality and used by the municipality, but could it be shared between these uses? Conceptually, yeah, you could do that. There's nothing legally preventing you from doing it. What it looks like is you'd have annual payments to the farmer. This property would stay in production in most years, not all years, in most years. And there'd be some flexibility in how they run their production. On the municipal side, it is a known supply, so the contract will define how often you get that supply. And then there's regional benefits that Greg was touching upon about keeping that land in production. So there's benefits to both sides, but this is what we mean by water sharing. It's taking a water resource that's been used on a farm for generations, and instead of permanently transferring it to, instead of permanently transferring it to another use, you're gonna use it in the new use some number of years, maybe 3 out of 10 is a common metric used. Maybe 3 out of 10 years it's used in municipal use. In the other 7 out of 10 years, it would stay in farming. That's the whole idea of these water sharing partnerships. So this, like I said, this has been talked about for over 10 years. Where it really started was in 2005, the state did this water supply plan called SWASI, State Water Supply Initiative. And that plan predicted that the state would lose 500,000 irrigated acres for over a 50-year time period. And that's about 20% of the total irrigated land in the state. The reasons it was going to lose 500,000 acres was about 100,000 acres were going to be built upon, so the farm was going to turn into homes. About 200,000 acres were thought to be transferred, the water would be transferred off farm to support land development. And about 200,000 acres were going to be lost for other reasons. Augmentation needs, compact compliance, that's interstate compact compliance, CRP enrollments, and groundwater overdraft. The biggest one here is groundwater overdraft. The reality is we have not been good groundwater managers for many decades, and that's coming to hit home in a lot of groundwater basins, not just in Colorado, but in the western US. So this was scary. And so the state started to think about, well, what could we do about that? If that's the prediction, what could we do about it? And so this idea came out that we could look at these alternative transfer methods, which had a name called abbreviation ATMs, basically that water sharing concept I just ran through. So in 2007, they set up a grant program to start to fund research into this and start to fund pilot projects into this. And then fast forward 8 years, 2015, the state water plan set a goal that we'd have 50,000 acre feet across the state involved in these water sharing agreements by 2030. So this grant program, since 2007, has funded about $8 million worth of work. That's as of 6 months ago. And my little chart here, the color coordination is blue dots are research, purple dots are pilot programs with munis, green dots are pilot programs with environmental uses. But what you see is prior to about 2015, most of the projects funded were research. This was things like some of the stuff Joel was actually working on, like how could you get consumptive use off a farm and still keep the farm in production? Could you go to a drier use crop? Could you actually do dry land farming for a number of years? So there's all sorts of research being done. And then it's been primarily pilots since 2015 that's been funded. But the state has put $8 million towards this question of, can we share water? So an example in Larimer County, Little Thompson Farm is right about here, southwest of Berthoud. City of Broomfield is down here, north of Denver. Carter Lake is called out because that is one of the Colorado Big Thompson Project reservoirs. And there is a pipeline network that gets water from this reservoir to City of Broomfield. It's this sort of the southern end of the CBT system. And so what happened? Well, Larimer County bought that farm. Larimer County Open Space bought that farm for $8.2 million. That farm came with 2 water supply sources, shares in a local ditch company called Handy Ditch, and a bunch of units of CBT water. Now, CBT water is highly transferable. Everything from Fort Collins to Broomfield, most of this area is built on the backbone of transferring CBT units from farm use to municipal use. So it came with a bunch of CBT units. So what happened was they entered into an agreement with Broomfield where Broomfield straight up bought a bunch of those units. I had the number in my notes, but anyway, $2.9 million worth. They just bought them and transferred them. Then there was some other CBT units where they entered into a partnership where in 3 out of 10 years, Broomfield can call on those units and use them for municipal use. In 7 out of 10 years, those units will go to the farm and keep farming. And there's payments involved in there. If you want to know more about this pilot, just Google Larimer County Little Thompson Farm. There's an entire web page that Larimer County has devoted to the project, and there's reports, and have fun. You can get as much information as you want on that. So I have two more topics to talk about: barriers and complementary actions. So these could be good ideas, right? Water sharing between farms and municipalities. There are a lot of barriers to doing this: economic, regulatory, hydrologic, and comfort. They're all real. They're all important. I'll touch upon a few. Economic. The muni is going to build homes with this water. They have to have this really robust water portfolio that they just need to fine tune in order to make water sharing really pencil out. If they're going to use the water and support giving water to homes forever, indefinitely, it usually makes sense to buy the water rights. Economically, it makes sense. If you're paying lease, it's the same reason people buy homes instead of rent them forever if they have the economic means to do so. The economics of leasing forever typically don't work in your favor. In agriculture, and I've experienced this firsthand, there is a sentiment of why would I commit to a really long-term lease because I'm just taking options off the table for me and for my kids and my grandkids. You're tying up a huge amount of value when you say the water will never be transferred off this farm. It's a real thing. So economically, there are real hurdles to doing these water sharing agreements. If we want, just for time, I won't go into these other ones. But these are some of the barriers to why these things have been difficult to get in place. There have been successes. We did an inventory of these water sharing agreements a few years ago. I think there's something like 20 or 30 water sharing agreements across the state that have been implemented. So they can be done. A lot of success in the Arkansas Basin, down kind of below Pueblo Reservoir with these water sharing agreements. So complementary actions, I just have 3. So water's complicated, right? So what else could we do besides trying to share it? Easements, land easements. Just put water to the side. Don't worry about water. If you think an agricultural property has a lot of value and benefits to an area, put money towards conserving that land. Don't worry about the water. Just keep the land in agricultural production through agricultural conservation easements. Then second thing, municipal water dedication policies are really impactful. It's how we grow more people with less water use, and less water use means less transfers of water off farmland. So how do you encourage dense development? Tell the developer, you can build a home and dedicate less water to me if that home has a lower water use footprint. They will do it. It saves them money. They will be incentivized to do it. So we can, through dedication policies, we can incentivize dense development with not a lot of outdoor landscaping, and basically that will have the effect of keeping more farms in production to sort of the same number of people growing in the state. Finally, leasebacks. This isn't a great thing, but it is something that has been taking place and will continue to take place. The municipal water utilities acquire the water permanently. They own them. They have the rights to it. But municipalities are really good at water planning, typically. They're planning for the 60-year drought, right? The drought that comes once in a generation, which means in an average year, they're sitting on way more water than they need. This is up and down the state. This is everywhere. So in every year that they have a surplus of water, they typically do lease it back to agriculture. And my one thing I'll plug is, that's great, that should continue, but really where farmers benefit is long-term water leases. So Muni's really looking at their water portfolio and saying, could I lease this out for 20 years or 10 years? That certainty of having a water supply for like 10 years means the farmer can go get loans that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get, perhaps. So thinking about long-term water leases, it's not forever, because everyone worries about the forever aspect, but doing long-term water leases from Muni water holdings back to farms and agriculture is more beneficial than what's done today, which is sort of an annual thinking, do we have water, do we have water? So anyway, these are complementary. You're not sharing the water. Well, I guess here you're kind of sharing the water, but you're not like contractually sharing the water, but these are all sort of could be beneficial to agriculture. So that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brett.
Should we do questions later?
I'm going to say we could probably do one question. Here we go, right here.
I think this is along the lines of what you're talking about. I recently asked a 98-year-old woman, she's since passed, what the biggest thing that she noticed growing up her whole life in Colorado was. And she said the most productive farmland has been developed and is no longer producing produce.
Yeah. I can comment a little bit on that. So,
Use the mic to do it, though.
yeah, sure. Harsh reality, but it is true, and it's exactly what she was saying. So why is Fort Collins where it is? And why is Boulder where it is? Why is Denver where it is? They're there because over millennia, the mountains have been shedding sediment down, right, through river systems. And the sediment comes out and it deposits and it creates really productive soils. So all these rivers that are coming off the Front Range Mountains, the reason the towns originally developed where they are is because it was really productive ground, because it was right at the toe of where those soils had been developed from sedimentation off the mountains. As you move east, the soils do degrade. I mean, the most productive soils in the state are against the Front Range. And so, that's the harsh reality is the towns that originally were settled were some of the most productive ground. Those towns are turning into bigger cities and developing. Some of the most productive ground in the state is getting developed upon. Yeah.
Thank you again. Awesome. With that, yes, why not? 2 rounds of applause. As we pull up Katie's slide deck right now, if I forget to say it later, all of these slides are going to be available on the website. They're not quite there yet. I hopefully will have them there tomorrow. So we'll put the links. We've had several links mentioned throughout tonight. We'll make sure we put those on the website too. So kind of everything's in one spot for you.